There's another part of this Farmer Speaks research conducted by J.L. Farmakis. Over the last 3 years, there's been a really increase in the satisfaction with the farmers' production decisions. And we want to consider that outlook for our panel here now as we move forward. Sarah, let's start with you on this one. How optimistic are you about the remainder of 2022 and really beyond that as well?
So I think it's important to note, of course, that in March of 2022, I would say that most North Dakotans were really optimistic about how this whole thing was going to go. Up until that point, we hadn't really had any major surprises with our winters. And then all of a sudden, April happened and the entire spring planting season really went down a different pathway. So that's interesting. But as it sits today, we still have really good commodity prices. We have a really good opportunity to make a lot of money. I would say that there are some things that I see that I find a little bit worrisome as far as, we're in an inflationary period. The Fed just raised the interest rate. And I wasn't farming in 1980. That's the generation before me. But when you start to see inflation like we've got it in interest rates start to climb a little bit, it makes me a little bit worried. Hopefully we're not going to have, a major farm crisis on the back end of this whole thing. So I do want to look out for that a little bit. But I think 2022 right now still looks pretty good. And so I'm pretty optimistic about that. Right now, immediately in the agronomic world, I'm looking out for some interesting pests out in the field. Grasshoppers, of all crazy things, for as wet as it's been, is actually an issue. I actually saw a neighbor's field of mine where he had 20 acres of his barley field that were nipped down to the soil surface by grasshoppers. It was pretty crazy. So it's something, it's left over from the drought. That's when they all lay the eggs, but so we got to watch out for that, and then make sure we get the weeds sprayed. Resistant weeds are all over the place, and timely control of them is kind of a big deal. So that's kind of what I'm thinking about right now, I guess.
Tim, what about you? What issues are you looking at? What's your level of optimism?
Well, as a farmer, you got to be optimistic. You got to love it when you have these kind of commodity prices. When you look in your backyard and you see what your fields look like, you feel pretty good. The caution is what we've talked about is the changes in price, inflationary times, whether it's fuel, fertilizer, seed, those extra costs. You might feel pretty good, especially if you have some leftover corn and soybeans in your bin yet that you can sell. But when we look to next year and our costs are higher, and a lot of the burden is shifting to the farmer. We've all talked about it. We got to buy inputs earlier. We have 2 years worth of inputs in 1 year that we're paying for. With interest rates raising, that's concerning. That's concerning to me. So putting it all together, we have an optimistic look. And I did start farming in the 80s, so I did get a taste of the inflationary late 70s and in the early 80s. And so it does kind of remind you things do repeat themselves. And so I think we got to be cautiously optimistic looking forward and be a lot smarter. And we are a lot smarter because of technology, because of the amount of news we get. We know more about our fields today than we ever have. We have computers full of information that we can tell you what every inch of soil is performing and how it's performing. So that to me is we have more tools at our disposal, and I hope to make better decisions going forward.
Bob, these certainly are uncertain times in agriculture. What's your mindset as we move forward?
Well, certainly I'm optimistic. I wouldn't have brought 2 sons and a son-in-law back to the farm if I wasn't. And actually my last son is up in North Dakota farming as well. So our entire family are family farmers. Just as a side note, we did require that all of our children have a college degree and then 3 years of work experience after they were out of college before we let them come back to our farm. And I think that was important. really give them a level of maturity, give them an opportunity to see how other farms and other businesses are run. So I think that's important. I did live through the 80s, and a lot of my neighbors didn't make it. And it wasn't because they were poor operators, just a bad decision at the wrong time on timing, buying a piece of equipment at the wrong time. And so I have that discussion a lot with my sons and my daughter to be careful because they did not live through that. So while I'm very always optimistic long-term, you still got to survive your worst day. We saw that in the ethanol business a few years back where quite a few places went broke that if they could have survived 2 or 3 more weeks, things changed and they would have been there today. And so that's just some good things that I've had the opportunity to live through. Certainly buying inputs is going to be just so interesting this year. I don't have a lot of bragging rights to great prices that I've got forward contracted because when we bought that expensive fuel and that expensive fertilizer last year, you know, it's double of what we had paid the year before. We also sold a lot of our grain to match that, to make sure that we're going to be profitable. And so we missed some of the highs that come, unfortunately, from this Ukrainian war. But I'm always telling my sons and my daughter, as well as you know, some of the young guys that you know, those baseball players that hit 400, they aren't the ones hitting the home runs. It's the ones that hit singles and doubles. Make sure you're selling enough grain, pre-selling to match the input you're buying, and then take the risk on the rest of it. And you know, you don't have bragging rights. Yeah, some nights when you miss that, but you'll be around a long time and maybe some of the others won't. So very optimistic, but short term, these are going to be very interesting times with the expenses we're going to have that we know we're going to have next year.
I'm very impressed by 5 generations of farming. Do you have a 6th generation coming in behind as well?
Well, the sons are the 6th. I'm the 5th. And the sons are the 6th. And we've got... I've got a grandson, 16 years old, that's working on the farm this summer. And I tell my wife it's just one of the greatest joys you could ever have is to look over there and watching him farming. But I think we'll have the same rule with any of them as well, that they need to get a college education and then go out and work somewhere else for a few years before they come back. But absolutely. And the other thing is, you know, I'm only responsible for the generations going forward. I have nothing to say about the ones before me. And for a lot of you people that don't know, it was maybe different years ago, but our parents live a long time. So when you say you're a 5th generation farmer, I got the rights to buy that farm from my parents or my uncles. It's not inherited like it used to be because, you know, my mom's 86, you know, and she'll probably be around a long time yet. So I think that's the difference that a lot of people don't understand. People don't necessarily inherit those farms. We got a lot of professional help when we started bringing our kids back to the farm. And I certainly encourage other people to do the same.
We're getting a lot of good questions. I want to get to those as well. You mentioned buying early and the timing for buying your fertilizer. Are you also buying chemicals earlier too? And they're curious, what months are you putting in your orders for your crop protection products, your fungicides, your insecticides, seed treatments, those kind of things? Tim, let's start with you on that one.
So on crop protection, we always would do that before the end of the year. So we'd be doing that after harvest. We'd start looking at the different programs, starting to put together the programs. Unfortunately, in our area, I can ask to get those products sooner, or at least talk about them sooner, but there's no pricing. So I really don't lock in anything until I know that the prices are here in Iowa, that I can lock those prices in. Same with fertilizer. I pushed my guys to get me prices on fertilizer last year, and I think we're going to have to do that again. So my timing is always towards the end of the year, before in December, in November, December. That's what we typically would do. I think we're going to have to ratchet that up a little sooner and be thinking about that pre-harvest this year.
Bob, I saw you shaking your head when Tim was talking there.
Absolutely. We struggle to get chemical prices and all the herbicide prices from our dealers in a timely manner for what we like. We would like to be buying them, you know, in September through the end of November to have those things locked up. December 15th, I sit down with my banker and go through my year end because my corporate year ends the end of November. Fertilizer, we're talking to our dealers, much like Sarah said, if they ended up with some fertilizer left over that they're going to want to move, turn that into cash. We're talking to them, maybe that's an opportunity. So a lot of times we will buy fertilizer in August to September, start filling up the liquid fertilizer tanks then. And then, of course, seed dealers, they're there bright and early. And we can do pretty well, you know, if you make some commitments there. But I would always want to have, you know, 3/4 of my inputs bought by the end of November. We have enough storage for propane and diesel, you know, for about a half of a year, so we can plant the spring crop. Now we're looking pricing for the fall crop. But it takes a lot of money. Most of these things that used to be, you just committed to it and you paid for it later. In our area anyway, this year, they wanted the full check. And that makes a big difference, especially with interest rates going up, especially for some of the younger farmers.
Yeah, I love this question we got from one of our viewers. You talk a lot about the changes implemented, new practices that are started or expanded, things with storage, etc. What, if anything, have you stopped doing? Sarah, how about you?
What have we stopped doing? So it is interesting to note that it wasn't so many years ago that we were really a pretty strict corn soybean rotation. And then we kind of added wheat into the rotation, and then we kind of added malt and barley into the rotation. And now we're adding in sunflowers. So I would say, I think having a strict rotation is something that has kind of changed a little bit for us. We've been expanding out and trying other crops in case there's a market opportunity there. And it's interesting that we're doing that even now in these high commodity market times where it would be fairly simple to just do corn and soybeans, I think.
What are your thoughts on carbon credits for agriculture?
So just full transparency, I actually have a master's degree in soil science. So I'll start there. And so I have thought a little bit about carbon credits. You know, it's great that we want to have this, that we have a market availability of this opportunity for farmers. I think it's really interesting that the market believes that it can accurately quantify the amount of carbon that's being sequestered in the soil. I don't know how many people have actually gone out and done any bulk density soil sampling, but that is a measurement that you actually need to take in order to quantify carbon sequestration. And it's really difficult, even if you were to take a bulk density sample every year in exactly the same spot to get a consistent bulk density so you can actually quantify the carbon sequestration. So I actually have some questions around, like, what are you actually, what are we actually trading here? Because I don't think we're actually quantifying that in the marketplace. And I think that puts risk in for the farmer. So I think that's a challenge. But, you know, I understand why companies want to do this. I think there's some ethical issues with a couple of contracts that are out there, and I hope that some of the companies are really good about helping farmers understand what's in those contracts. And I hope that universities step up, and land grant universities, to really help farmers understand the opportunities in the marketplace, the challenges, and the things that we don't understand right now, because there certainly is all three of those places. At this point in time, our farm has not chosen to participate in the carbon markets. The other thing that I think we haven't thought about is that farming in and to itself is not a carbon neutral business. And into the future, if we sell all of our carbon credits to these other companies, and the government, for instance, were to come to agriculture and say, now you need to become carbon neutral, what do we have left to sell? So these are things that go through my mind. I don't know if I'm in the right place on it, but there you go.
Well, you've obviously given it a lot of thought. Tim, what's your opinion as it relates to carbon credits?
I'm excited about the opportunity with carbon credits, but I think we're in that educational time frame with farmers. Farmers aren't understanding what the end game is. So if we can get our crop carbon neutral or carbon negative, and I can have my ethanol plant that's going to pipe the CO2 up to my buddies in North Dakota, and they can become carbon neutral, we can preserve our ethanol industry long term. And I think there'll be money on both sides. And that's, I'm excited about it, but I'm being very cautiously optimistic that we have to be educated in what we're actually getting into. I've listened to a lot of presentations about it. In fact, just one last week for a one-year program that I kind of like. And I think we just got to get our feet wet, and we got to participate in it. But most farmers aren't thinking about what the long-term goal is with the ethanol plants being hooked onto the liquid carbon pipeline.
I love the questions we're getting in. With high commodity prices, would special offers or rewards sway you to try a new product, or are you more comfortable staying with something that you know? Bob, let's start with you on that one.
Well, certainly not only the higher prices for the crops, but the higher prices for the inputs. And I think that is what probably pushes you. Now is probably the time to give this a try. I believe it was said earlier, we certainly don't want to take a chance on getting any less than maximum crop that's available to us for the year. So I'm not looking to cut corners, but there are new products out there. Now, we've done this on our farm for many years. A 24-row corn planter with split tanks, and you can do an entire field as a test plot in different types of soils and such. And then the combine, through the wonders of GPS, knows exactly where your test plot is and what it does. We did some fungicide a couple of years ago, and I went up, I fly an airplane and took pictures right before we harvested, and it was a striped field. You could absolutely see every 120-foot boom width where we did it. But when it comes down to the actual yield, not a penny of difference. So sometimes just visual is not what makes the difference. You also got to prove it, and we're big on proving it to make sure that whatever we're trying, but we're always open to trying new things. And certainly if there's a deal on trying some acres, that moves to the front of the list of what we're going to give a try to for the year. But our whole farm is basically a test plot.
Good point. Sarah, along that same line, the reward programs, they mean anything to you, and what's your take on trying new products?
So, okay, for trying new products, the first question that I'm going to ask is, show me your data. And when I look at the data, I'm going to wonder who conducted your trial, and I'm going to take a look at how the statistics were conducted. If you really want me to take you seriously, I expect it to be done by a third party. So, yeah, that might be kind of tough, but that's how I take a look at it, I guess, because I'm looking for an opportunity of ROI, and I want to see multi-year data. We've got really extreme weather up here, and so you might hit it one year, but it needs to be something that's going to be consistent relatively over time. And reward programs, to a certain extent, I'll participate in them. I feel like everybody's got a reward program, and honestly, the person who really ends up working that program at the end of the day is my egg retailer. I actually don't end up hearing a lot about the reward programs that exist, because what we do is we take a look at the products and how they work agronomically out in the field, and then if there's programs on the backside that fit that, that's great. If not, and that product is too expensive, then I will go to another plan. There's always more than one way to skin a cat. And then if plan A was within, relatively within budget, then we'll go for it. So, but the person who ends up seeing the rewards programs is the retailer, not necessarily me.
Tim, what about you? When you're looking at new products, what's your mindset?
Well, if you look at reward programs, that doesn't get me to buying a new product. I buy a new product because I've identified a problem, whether it's resistant water hemp or a problem in my field today that I can buy a product that will supposedly be easier to use and maybe lower risk and do a better job. So I look at it just as, will it work? And I leave a lot of check strips. And just like Bob said, our whole field is a test plot. We can do so much. We're testing several varieties against several different things. We always are trying something new. Biologicals are the hottest thing that we've been trying lately. Reward programs, double-edged sword. It just, you love and you hate them. If we could just all get the price up front, we wouldn't have to deal with reward programs.
One last question. As you look ahead, what do you see as your top 3 challenges for 2023? And they want you to rank it in order, if you would. Sarah, let's start with you.
So, okay, well, the top 3 challenges I think right now in order are going to be the input prices, trying to figure out where that's at, and then the commodity markets, or interest rates for our operating loans, I think, and then the commodity prices and how that fits into how you plan out your marketing for those things. I think those are the 3 biggest challenges.
Bob, what about you?
Well, I would agree. The inputs are going to be a real challenge, knowing when to buy. You know, they've inflated so much, they can certainly drop right back down. Well, a few years back, we seen that when China had the Olympics, where Roundup doubled in price, but then it came right back down the next year. So that'll be probably our biggest challenge for us, probably then getting markets that will match those input costs. Again, I'd rather guarantee myself a nice profit selling the grain when I buy those inputs. Third would be the interest rates and the banking issue, especially for my sons and daughter, because when you double your expenses, you got a double line of credit, and the banks need collateral to cover that. That's just the way it works. And so I don't want to be the banker. I want to just buy my own inputs. So that will be an issue for a lot of our younger farmers that are in great shape, but when you're borrowing double the money for inputs, I think that's going to be interesting.
There's no doubt. What about you, Tim? Top 3?
I put input cost and commodity prices together because they're going to be tied hand in hand. The other one and I rent about half of my land and I own about half. So land rents, land costs, I think are going to be a hot issue if we continue on with these red hot commodity prices till the end of the year. And of course, the financial aspect, and you guys all mentioned that, but if, we're going to be borrowing money at another % higher than what we normally have. And are our bankers going to be our friends in the ag world once these commodity prices soften? That's going to be the question. So, we talked about it, we're putting a lot more risk in our operations, which means a lot more reliance on our financial institutions. So I'd say that's my top 3/4.
Good deal. Well, I promised an all-star panel, and I don't think we disappointed. Bob Metz from South Dakota, Tim Recker from Iowa, and Sarah Lovis from North Dakota. Again, a big thank you to each one of our farmer panelists for being with us today. And thank you for attending this 4th JL Farmakis regional webinar focused here on the Midwest. For a copy of the full Farmer Speaks study that we reviewed today, you can contact your JL Farmakis representative, and you can keep an eye out for the next webinar in the JL Farmakis regional series that is ongoing. Thanks to everyone. Have yourself a great day.